Good evening, everybody. What an evening it has been so far. So I'm Jennifer LaRue. I'm the Director of Public Programs at the Mark Twain House and Museum, and I'm delighted to be hosting our first A Little Harmless Fun of the season with our dear friend Frank Rizzo and our new dear friend Gregory Maguire. I'll introduce them both in a moment, but I just want to let you know our evening started off after we've done several tech runs for this program, so we were fully prepared. And about half an hour ago, Gregory lost his power in this set of storms that breezed through New England this evening. And so luckily he had a friend who invited him over and let him do this from his house or their house. I don't know whose house it is, but anyway, thank you, friends. And so we thought we were all set. And then we got Frank on, and something has gone wrong with Frank's tech. So Frank is on screen, but we are communicating via our cell phones. So the audio you'll hear from Frank is actually through our phones. But where there's a will, there's a way. And I'm telling you, I have done something like 25 Crowdcast programs since March when we began, or April, and every single one, at least one thing goes wrong, and they all still turn out super fun. So tonight's going to be a great, great night. And before we move on, I just wanted to cover a little bit of housekeeping, some of it Crowdcast related and some related to the Mark Twain House and Museum. I see you all already have embraced the chat feature, and keep chatting. That's what one of the fun things about these virtual programs and our Crowdcast in particular is people make friends. And I always think, you can't do that when you're in the auditorium at a live event. You can only chat with each other in these virtual events. So I think that's kind of a silver lining. So take advantage of that. However, we're going to have a Q&A with Frank and Gregory at the end. And if you have a question for the Q&A, please post it in that Ask a Question area at the very middle of the bottom of your screen. And that'll make it a lot easier for us to manage that part of the program. Right above that is a very important button, and I know you all registered and spent some money to take part in this program tonight, and I deeply appreciate that. I would say that if you are able to go beyond that a little bit and help us out by clicking that donate button, it makes a huge difference. The Mark Twain House and Museum is alive and kicking, but it's not been an easy time for us or any other museum. And the staff is furloughed one day a week, myself included. So, $1, $5, anything that you might be able to spare, I would just want you to know the staff and the board, the trustees of the museum really deeply appreciate that. So if you're able, thank you. So having said all of that, I'm going to introduce our guests, and then I'm going to sit back with my Mark Twain signature cocktail and enjoy the evening. Right? So, you all know Frank Rizzo. Frank is a New York theater critic for Variety, writer for Connecticut Magazine, the New York Times, Hartford Magazine, and other publications. This is what, our third season of A Little Harmless Fun?
I think so.
Yeah, and it has been a lot of fun, and I think mostly harmless, right? Frank has been a great friend of the museum for a very long time, and we're grateful for his presence. Before I introduce Gregory, I just want to point out that in addition to this Little Harmless Fun, we have October 27th, we have toy expert Chris Byrne coming to talk about toys ahead of the holiday season, so that's going to be fun. On November 12th, we have Joyce Maynard, who we were supposed to have last spring, and she wasn't able to come because of the COVID situation. And Frank, she's been spending her COVID time where? At the base of a volcano?
At the base of a volcano on a lake in Guatemala. But she's back now. Everything's fine. She's in her home in New Hampshire, but she's heading back to Yale here in New Haven probably in a week or two.
Awesome. Well, we're looking forward to that. And then Frank and I just put this one on the calendar. I'm super excited about all of this, especially this December 8th. Many of us will remember is the 40th anniversary of the death of John Lennon. And Frank and a photojournalist covered vigils in Central Park, or outside, no, it was outside
the Dakota.
And they're going to be sharing with us obviously unpublished photos and stories. And we're all going to be sharing our recollections of that terrible time. We're going to be joined by Oh gosh,
a photographer who we went me with for the event, Jim Meehan, award-winning photographer, and his photographs of that event are amazing. And it actually is incredibly touching. And when I look at those photos, these were like 18, 20-year-old kids. Now they're in their 60s and 70s. So I think it'll be interesting for them, maybe. If you're at the vigil, come check out this event, and you might see yourself.
There you go. So, Frank, I think your mic might be working now. I'm hearing from the audience that you're echoing a lot, and when I look at your screen, your mic is on. So we're going to try a quick experiment. I'm going to hang up on you.
Okay.
And let's see.
Oh, okay. This is so
Everybody
exciting, folks.
We're going to remember this one of these days. Everybody cross your fingers, please. Frank, can you hear me?
Can you hear me okay? Now, the problem is, I don't think I can hear you.
Oh, no.
I can't hear you. So can you give me a call?
Yeah. Sorry, folks. We thought we had it there.
Hey, Jennifer.
Hi, Frank. We're just going to have to apologize for the echo. There is just nothing I can think to do about this other than that. So if you can bear with us, folks. Yes, I'm going to mute you and see if that works. Does that help? Frank, say a word or two.
Fingers crossed here in New Haven.
Okay. That worked.
I think that's actually satisfactory.
Yay! I think that worked. Okay, unsure computer, mute phone. We'll figure it out. I'm going to be off the screen in a minute anyway. So I want to just tell you that we have John Hodgman coming to talk on October 15th. We have Carl Hyacin in the house virtually on October 20th. We have our Mark Twain American Voice in Literature Awards ceremony in which we're presenting our $25,000 award, which is made possible by our dear friend and trustee David Baldacci, going to Ocean Vuong for his novel On Earth We're Briefly Gorgeous. And we have our virtual gala on November 6th, which is free. We've got Jodi Picoult, John Grisham, David Baldacci, Brad Paisley, Jimmy Buffett, Ron Chernow, scores of people who are doing something for us for our gala. So tune in. It's free. There's tons of cool stuff to bid on. It's going to be a great evening. So I hope to see you there. So, Gregory Maguire, you've been to the Mark Twain House before in person, and this is a virtual visit, but it just feels the same. He's a New York Times bestselling author of Confessions of an Ugly Stepsister, Lost, Mirror, Mirror, After Alice, Hiddensee, and The Wicked Years, a series that includes Wicked, yay, Son of a Witch, A Lion Among Men, and Out of Oz. Wicked, a beloved classic and basis for the blockbuster Tony Award-winning Broadway musical, is celebrating, can you believe it, its 25th anniversary in print with a new hardcover edition. Maguire has lectured on art, literature, and culture, both at home and abroad, and his new novel, is this today? That your novel
It came out yesterday.
Yesterday, okay. A Wild Winter Swan, which is included in the ticket price that you all paid. So very excited about all of that. Welcome, Gregory. Welcome, Frank. I'm going to disappear and enjoy, and I'll be back on for Q&A at the end.
Fun. A series of conversations of intriguing, thoughtful, and creative figures in today's culture. I'm excited about Gregory's book, A Wild Winter Swan. This is the advanced copy, and I read it, and it's really, really terrific. So first of all, Gregory, how are you, and how's your family, and how's everything in Concord, Massachusetts?
Well, everything is fine, and I want to petition the people in the audience to be calm about whatever echo you might hear, because it actually seems appropriate. My books are all about echoes. One story being launched 100 years ago, 150 years ago, and another story from me being a kind of basket, collecting the echo of an earlier story and presenting it to the world again. So, thank you, everybody, for your patience. I have to say, Frank, you asked me how my family is. About an hour ago, I was preparing for this, and the lights went out. I was in the shower. I thought, the lights haven't gone out in my house in about 22 years. And they went on and off like a doppel, kind of exorcist presence. And immediately I thought, how am I going to be in touch with Frank and with the Mark Twain friends in Hartford? I couldn't even get my garage door open because the power was out. I couldn't drive to see if there was power in some neighboring street or town. And I had almost no power left in my phone, even to ring. So I ran frantically out into the storm, having dressed myself appropriately first. And with the 12% of power I had left, I called a friend and said, this is a dire emergency. Please, come get me in my computer. And she did, and she set me up in her dining room. So I want to thank Tom and Martha for bringing me into their home so I could be here with you today. My family is fine. We are surviving COVID, the Corona coaster, as some call it.
I am Gregory. I had this expression on my face that looked like intelligence, but actually it was because I'm such a good actor, because I'm having a little bit of a problem with my sound. I can hear myself, but unfortunately I can't hear you. So one of our listeners suggested that I mute the phone, which I did. Thank you, Jim. But when I tried to unmute it or mute it again back and forth, it doesn't seem to be coming in at all. I imagine you can hear me, correct?
Yes.
Well, we can do one of two things. Jennifer could call me, which is not a bad idea, or I can just give you some questions.
That's fine.
And I understand A Wild Winter Swan was inspired by P.O. Travers. Not inspired, but you got a suggestion from P.O. Travers, the author of the Mary Poppins books. And she actually suggested to you 25 years ago the subject of the Hans Christian Andersen story that the book is inspired by. Can you talk a little bit about that encounter?
Yes. I was just about to come out with Wicked, and I was living in London. P.O. Travers was a very elderly lady. She sat in her chair in the corner of her room, and she responded to a letter I wrote saying, Miss Travers, I'd love to come for tea. Or no, I didn't even say that. I just said, I'd like to meet you if ever. She wrote back and she said, you must come on Tuesday next. So it was a command performance. I put on my hat. I went to Chelsea and I crept into the room. I was let in. There she was in the corner, very fierce.
Did she have an umbrella?
Not in the house. And we talked about Wicked. We talked about her book. She didn't ever really figure out who I was. But we had in common a trust and a belief in the value of old stories. And after she heard I was writing a story about the Wicked Witch of the West, she said, there's that boy with the wing. Give him something to do. This was 25 years ago. And so I did.
So how So has this been like hovering over your head for 25 years?
I forgot all about that. But I have been transcribing journals that I've kept since childhood, and I came upon my reporting of that conversation, and I thought, the author of Mary Poppins gave me a job to do. I better do it, and I decided to.
So you're re-inspired. You, I would imagine, run to your Hans Christian Andersen anthology and reread the story, and then where does Gregory Maguire's imagination go from there?
Well, this was an interesting exercise, Frank. And I can't tell by your expression if you're hearing some of what I'm saying.
I'm hearing all of it.
Oh, good.
We're back on track.
Okay, good. Normally, I would read a story with great scrutiny because I always want never to trespass upon the terrain or to contradict the terrain of the original author. I just want to expand it and open it up. In the case of this story, it is not a well-known tale. Some people who love Hans Christian Andersen know The Wild Swan, but most people know The Ugly Duckling, The Little Mermaid, The Emperor's New Clothes. The Wild Swan is famous mostly for its final image of the boy with the swan ring. So I thought, I don't need to fill in the blanks of this. I just need to use the image that he gave me. But of course, I wanted to honor Hans Christian Andersen, who gave me that image. So when I come up with a boy with one swan wing, it only takes me about 12 seconds to realize his name must be Hans. And I thought, well, here I am thanking Hans Christian Andersen, tipping my hat at him. But I also go into the OED and I look up the derivation of the name Hans. Now it's dimly related to John and Ivan, and there are lots of different complicated ways that names get made. There is an old Sanskrit word that means swan. And that word was thought to be part of the progenitorship of the name Hans. Wow. So when I read all that, I thought, I'm in that Maguire space.
So what is there about swans that are so compelling? Because a goose has a long neck, a dove is equally as white, but nothing transfixes us like a swan does. It's loyal, it's mysterious, it's a little bit intimidating. Swans.
Swans are strong and dangerous, and I don't think it can be disputed that they must be one of the most beautiful birds. I mean, many birds are beautiful. Maybe all birds are beautiful, but only Zeus only took a swan when he wanted to date Leda. You know, there's something immensely romantic and perhaps phallic, perhaps pure about the way a swan looks.
And maybe, if I may, a bit lyrical too, which kind of fits this book compared to some of your others, because instead of a big journey, an epic journey, it's a very intimate, very personal, very, in a way, claustrophobic story, because it centers on this young teenager, Laura. It's set in Manhattan on the Upper East Side in the 60s, in the 1960s, and she's living with her Italian American grandparents. And most of the action takes place in that house. So as I was reading it during the pandemic, I felt one with Laura. Can you talk about the intimacy and the, if I may, claustrophobia of the story and how it's so fitting.
Well, yes, I can. And I suppose I will perhaps anticipate a later question by starting by saying, I didn't know that A Wild Winter Swan would be published in month 7 of our national and international quarantine. But the book has, as you call it, an intimacy, perhaps a kind of claustrophobic quality. This child, Laura, who is 15 chronologically, but maybe a little younger, experientially. Part of it is her experience. Part of it is the time in which she grows up. This was before President Kennedy was shot. So perhaps the last Christmas season before we'd lost our national innocence for this generation. And I think of A Wild Winter Swan as comfort food. It's a book that takes place within a week. It observes the Aristotelian unities of time and place and dramatis personae. It's like a steaming hot slab of lasagna in between hardcover book. It's meant to nourish. It's meant to be something that you're happy to sit down with. Because once you enter the front doors of Laura's house and her life, you are sort of stuck there with her. She is imprisoned in her lack of capacity. And you love being there with her because you care about her, I hope. But at the same time, you want Laura to find a wing, or maybe two, in her own life, and see if she can.
It's a kind of a love story in a way between this boy and this girl, but not a love story in a traditional way.
One question that I will be happy to hear from people about is this a romance or not? And I'm not going to say.
And we won't give too much away either.
No, we won't. I'm not even sure if I know, but my readers will know.
Yeah. So many of your tales have had its main characters with a parent either missing or dead from their lives. It's a classic trope, especially for children's tales. And I wonder why is that? I know some hyper-vigilant parents who block from their children anything that's the least distressing, whether it be in stories or films or TV, until they're practically in high school. So I guess that's two questions. Well, one is the trope of having that missing parent, having that perhaps even dead parent, and why it's so rooted in children's literature. And yours.
And I think that when children have a perfectly safe lap upon which to sit and feel secure, we've already reached the happy ever after. That's where they want to get. That's where they want to settle, to reflect, to sleep. And until they get to that lap, that's where the story happens. I think this is not just true of children's stories. Some would say this is what the marriage plot is all about. But it is especially true of children's stories. And if the parents are gone, there is a more crucial urgency on how the children behave in a cold and amoral universe. It is more crucial for them to be brave and strong and smart and loyal. We all have to do this in our own lives, but children have to do it first. That's how they get out of childhood. in a way. Now, you know, Frank, if you and I have been friends for a while, that I come from a family where a parent died. My mother died when I was born. It used to make me feel terribly romantic and sort of selected for stardom, you know, by the drama of my origins. But in fact, in a certain way, we all start growing up once we put the parents aside, or once the parents put us aside, which can be a sadder situation. I don't know how to write a story where there's two parents present, you know, doing their taxes and sitting talking about the crossword puzzle of a Sunday evening. Like, oh, forget this. There's nothing happening here.
But growing up in Albany in the 1960s, coming from a background, and we have to add that your father remarried and had a wonderful stepmother who was very supportive of you, unlike the fairy tales, and you were inspired reading and libraries and books was a huge part of your childhood.
I used to give a lecture many decades ago called Abandoned at Birth, but Raised by Kindly Librarians. And it wasn't true. Well, it was a little true. My mother died. My father put me in an orphanage until his health recovered and he could get remarried, and then we all came back together. But the librarians really were a kind of parental figure in my life in particular, and all the lives of my siblings and classmates. But to me, they seemed to have a certain numinous quality. They knew everything. They walked around the library knowing where every book was, and they snapped the rubber bands on their wrists, and they stamped the cards, and they lived on the mere pennies we gave them for the book fines when we were overdue. I always thought these dedicated, devoted women, how can they live on only 25 cents a day in book fines? But they love literature, and they're willing to do it.
Well, seeing that we have you on this track a little bit, can you talk about just a few of the books that that influenced you when you were a kid? Not necessarily as a writer, but one or two that really swept you away. And if you came across them in an old bookstore, you would touch it and maybe clutch it to your heart.
It would be, if I came across any of these books, it would look remarkably like pornography. I love them so much. I used to eat books. I really did used to tear strips off the edge and chew them like gum. Not library books, but I couldn't get enough of them.
Wow.
But one book. Many books that I read when I was a kid were fantasies. All the famous ones: A Wrinkle in Time, Mary Poppins, Peter Pan, The Wizard of Oz, the Narnia book. All those books meant a great deal to me. They always made it on my list of favorite books. But there was only one book that was not a fantasy that was always on my top of my list, and that was the famous book Harriet the Spy.
That's Jennifer clapping. Yay. My favorite book of all time.
I have tried, in fact, in a small way, to make A Wild Winter Swan my own personal homage to Harriet. Because, if you think of it, the story takes place in 1962 in Yorkville, east of East End Avenue. I like to imagine that as Laura is dragging her way to school and worrying about the swan, Harriet is there too. She's going up and down East End Avenue on her spy route. Note, Frank, also, while Laura doesn't have Harriet's facility with language, she thinks in a story. And
That's right.
those block inserts where Laura is narrating what she knows about her life so far are a direct homage to Harriet the Spy.
Oh, how wonderful that is. And now I'm going to have to go back and imagine it in that context. I think that's a wonderful little private homage to from one author to another.
Well, when I stop and think, you asked me earlier, how did the story of P.L. Travers actually come back to you? It's because when I was 12 or 14, I started keeping a spy notebook like Harriet, and I'm still keeping it. I have written 1.6 million words in notebook and the last 8 years on the computer for almost 50 years. Harriet taught me to pay attention to the world, and she taught me to write every day. And I really do think, I know Alison Bechdel says this, and I think Michael Chabon says it. Many people in my generation say, I learned how to be an artist by Harriet's example.
Wow, that's wonderful. I'm not sure whether you know it, but storytelling was a bedtime ritual for Samuel Clemens.
I did not know
here
that.
at the Mark Twain House in Hartford. And one story he told his daughters, Clara and Susie, was about a poor boy who eats a magic flower that gives him the ability to talk to animals. He liked it so much, he even took notes on the fable, and he actually named it oleomargarine. The notes were expanded to the purloining of Prince Oleomargarine. This was discovered in his papers, and through the Mark Twain House, they kind of collaborated with another children's author and created a children's story that Mark Twain at least began. And so I'm sure there are copies of it at the Mark Twain House. If we were there, I could hold one up for you. But it shows you have something in common with even Mark Twain had felt it was something special to share stories with children.
Now, Frank, I have a question for you. I wonder about myself, but about other writers. To what degree are writers like me who pay attention to other writers' work and are inspired by it, and maybe even construct our fiction using raw material? To what extent are we actually liable for legal action? I mean, is it appropriate? Is it stealing? Is it lazy? I've always wondered how other people think about it, about a book that piggybacks on a great work.
Well, I come from the theater world, where, and especially the musical theater world, and musical theater is all about appropriation. It's taking a little bit of this, it's a little bit of that. It's being inspired by a trope. It's being inspired perhaps by another musical. It's taking jazz. It's taking ballads. It's taking R&B. It's fashioning something new. So if you're creating, in my opinion, something brand new, but using inspiration from others, that's an American tradition. That's America for you, Gregory.
Well, when I think about what I began with Wicked 25 years ago, taking one of the great foundational stories of 20th century and movie, 20th century American concept of itself, and having the temerity to say, oh, I'm going to tell people something they don't know about this story. On the one hand, I still think I should be taken out and shot. On the other hand, these stories belong to all of us. They were given to us by the artists who made them. And I like to think that L. Frank Baum and Margaret Hamilton and Hans Christian Andersen and even P.L. Travers would say, "Oh, I did something strong, didn't I?" It's still reaching into somebody else's heart.
Shakespeare borrowed from others as well. You take stories, especially stories that have become part of the culture, that have been handed down, and certainly something like Wizard of Oz is now handed down from one generation. Now we're into like the fifth or sixth generation. So, like Shakespeare, you take what is out there in the public consciousness and you recraft it into something that speaks to your generation that hopefully will also stay as well. I noticed, though, of all you've been inspired by Dickens and Baum and so many Hans Christian Andersen. There's one that you haven't really touched so far, and that is one that's been tapped so many times that, next to Alice in Wonderland, which you've also visited, that's Peter Pan. Why has Peter Pan sort of eluded you? Or maybe that's not quite the right word.
Well, I don't want to go all QAnon on you, Frank. But Peter Pan has always had a somewhat dubious psychosexual strand in it to me. The Captain Hook business, chasing after the boy who can't grow up. I mean, I didn't think anything of it when I was a kid. But if I were going to examine it now, it would be hard not to go a little Jeffrey Epstein, and I don't want to go there.
Hey, you tackled Alice in Wonderland, and that certainly has a little bit of Jeffrey Epstein too.
That is true. And I do actually touch a tiny bit on that. Although I will say, I do not think Lewis Carroll can be judged as a pervert, to use that cunning phrase from a few decades earlier. There's no proof and no indication that he ever meddled with the girls, especially he was warm to. Indeed, always when he photographed them, and he photographed them naked. Their mothers were always in the room. He was exploring what was a very new art form at the time, and there was a time of innocence. I'm not saying that he's blameless of what was in his heart, and it might have been corrosive, it might have been unseemly, but we have no proof that it is, and I think it's inappropriate for us to assume that it must be because we're that way. I don't mean we're that way, but I mean because we are freer to see the yin and yang in our own character.
Sure. You have 3 children. They're grown now.
I do.
And when they were young, what did they want to read, and were there any of your books?
Oh, you're such a vicious, mean-spirited man. The fact is, my children love to be read to so much that they didn't really want to put the energy into learning to read deeply for themselves. We have a very bookish household. Indeed, we read all the time. But they're all adopted kids. They came to us lacking some basic foundational stonework of security. And so if we would sit them on the sofa and read to them, that was what they wanted. A friend once said to me, a picture book is the perfect instrument for an older and a younger reader because it opens across 2 laps. That's the way it's made. And in a way, sharing any story with children of any age, or indeed, as I do with an elderly friend in a memory care unit, sharing a story across 2 laps is a chief ambition. Now, if our kids thought, oh, we can get this without having to do the work ourselves, hey, it's 17. I'm home from a soccer match. Can you read to us tonight? And of course, we always would.
Wicked has made such an impression on young women, especially via the musical. Can you tell a little bit of that origin story in terms of it being made into the musical? Well, I believe, I could be wrong here, that it was optioned first as a film, and then it was switched with Mark at Universal to be the musical. Is that correct?
Yes, and I can send this out to a 45-minute, mini-series. But in summation, once the book was published, it was almost immediately optioned by Demi Moore and her production company, which had a relationship with Universal. Now, you have to remember, Frank, that Wicked predate Harry Potter by about 2 years. And it's simultaneous just about with Philip Pullman, like the same season, I think. And it predates Peter Jackson, the movies of The Lord of the Rings, by maybe 3 years or so. So when it was optioned by Hollywood had not yet seen these big budget fantasy movies become the mega money spinners that they have become. So Hollywood was a little dubious about how to make a movie out of Wicked, which is mostly about Elphaba and Glinda, and there's no role for Mel Gibson, so what are they going to do with it? While it was being scripted over and over again, I saw 3 or 4 or 5 drafts. Mark Platt heard a knock on his door, and it was Stephen Schwartz, the composer of Wicked, who came in and said, I've been shown this book by my friend Holly Muir, who says it's a great book, and I've read the first 90 pages, and I want to bring this book to Broadway. I know you have the rights, Mark, at Universal Studios, but I'm here to tell you it would make a better play first before you film it, because, well, I have my reason. Mark said, it's up to Gregory. He has the right. He has 3 kids. He wants a movie sale. There isn't the money in Broadway that there is in movies in terms of upfront money. So Stephen came to see me. Not too far from you, actually, outside of Bristol, Connecticut.
Yeah.
We went for a walk in an undisclosed location, and I had my hat and we were like something out of Gray and Green. And he said to me, Gregory, I'm so convinced that you are going to understand what I say when I say your book is 19th century. It's full of high moral content. It's just moral sort of, what's the word in Shakespeare, since you're talking Shakespeare, a soliloquy. People have lots to say about power and emotion. And if you make a movie about it, they'll just have to,
Cut it.
raise an eyebrow and imply a lot. But if you give people a chance to sing, to open up their mouth and give to the world in song what is the deepest feeling that they have to share, it'll work. And I thought to myself, well, you don't have to say too much to persuade me. I'm a gay man. I mean, Broadway! But I still had children to feed and to raise, and the life of a novelist is not necessarily known for steady income. So I took my not yet right here and said, yes, say more. And he went on to say, I'm so convinced you're going to see the rightness of my plan, but I will admit to you, I've already conceived the first number and how the play will open. And I said, oh, you have you? And he said, yes. First song is going to be called No One Mourns the Wicked. And with those 5 words, Frank, he persuaded me. Because with those 5 words, he proved that he knew why I wrote the book. I didn't write it to be a Saturday Night Live skit or a parody, Comedy Channel parody of The Wizard of Oz. I wrote it to say something serious about how we humanize our enemy in order to legitimize taking up arms against them and hurting them.
Yeah.
That was why I wrote it. No One Mourns the Wicked says in 6 syllables, I get what you were doing. So he basically made the sale with that phrase, although I didn't let him know for about a year until the contracts were ready for that.
Very, very smart of you. Can you talk about just the emotional experience? I'm not sure when you first saw a full production with an audience. Was it in San Francisco? Was it New York? And can you just talk about going down the aisle, sitting in that seat, and being in the middle of the audience for the first time when the curtain raised and you saw Wicked the musical?
It was pretty amazing. I had heard the songs, most of them. I had attended a read-through, which is like an oratorio version, where people are just standing on risers and speaking their lines and singing with the piano. But I had no idea what they were going to do in terms of stagecraft, costumes. I didn't know what the bottom of Act 1 was going to look like when Elphaba rises.
Well, one of the best first act enders ever.
I'll tell you. So, the first time I saw Frank was at the first premiere before opening in San Francisco. I think San Francisco. I think the very first time it played for a playing audience. I was in row 8, and the curtain raised. There were monkeys. There was the dragon. I was thinking, I think we better adjust the meds on this. I mean, it seemed a bit, I thought, I'm sitting right, I can't even run through the exit. I'm right in the middle of like row A. And I was a little worried. And then Glinda comes down in the bubble, Kristen Chenoweth, good news. And it's all very thrilling. But it's still right on the edge of, are we going to feel? Are we going to feel? This is And then at the end of the opening number, the doors open and Idina Menzel comes out with her green face. Now, Idina Menzel is very well known now, and she was pretty well known to theater people back then because of Red. But she wasn't as well known as she became. And the audience went mad when the doors opened and strode out going to college for the first time. And I realized the screaming and hooting and hollering was a little bit of it was, yes, for Idina Menzel, but a lot of it was for the witch.
Yeah.
They were waiting for her. She was back. They loved her. This was before she sang a single note. And I thought to myself, whoa, this is going to work. This is going to work. They're on her side already. My work has been done.
And I imagine her first song, The Wizard and I. If you had any doubts, it probably would have been no problems after that song, because at that point you knew he got it.
Absolutely. She put it over. The place was like a rock, festival. It was just amazing. When it came to Broadway, and I invited my large family to the show. At the bottom of Act 1, one of my 6 brothers and sisters stood up to stretch his legs, and I had run to the bathroom. It was a very long Act 1. And he turned to me and he said, Gregory, I only have one word for you. And I said, what? He said, retired.
Well, you didn't retire.
I didn't retire.
You kept on writing, thankfully. But one more wicked question, and that is, did you have any idea that this show and the book, but the show, because it's you can actually see these people, you can't see the readers reading it and enjoying it, that would be such a touchstone for so many young girls?
No, I had no idea. I thought the book might make a good movie, and the book has Elphaba singing. If you've read the novel, she sings 3 times in the book. And that was important to me because I always thought the Wicked Witch of the West was one of the few people who didn't get a song in the movie Wizard of Oz. Nobody ever asked her what she would want if the wizard could give her anything. What she wanted was a family. What she wanted was not to be an eyesore. So I thought, when Wicked came out, I thought, well, a bunch of nerdy college kids, like the kind I was, will take it to their hearts. Maybe it'll live 5 or 10 years as a book. And that's great, as long as somebody likes it. I did think it might make an okay movie. But movies come and go, and unless they're classics like Groundhog Day or Gone with the Wind, mostly they go. And so then the play comes, and I suddenly think, how has this happened? The brilliance of Winnie Holtzman and Stephen Schwartz and all the people, all the great creative minds that went into making that a theatrical extravaganza have helped my story become a little tweak on the chromosome of popular culture, which I had not really meant to do. But Wicked is not part of our lives, not just part of my life, it's part of our life.
But if you go to the stage door, still 16 years, 17 years after it opened, it's been around the world. It's been on tour for forever. You still go to the stage doors. Now we're probably in the into the second generation of fans. Mothers who grew up in Wicked are taking their kids to see Wicked. But you go to the stage door, and there's something about that character that they connect to so strongly. What is it? Why?
I think Elphaba is both strong and weak. And that is certainly how I feel in my own heart. I know there are lots of things I give myself credit for. I'm very good at that. And there are other things I don't admit quite as openly that I wish I could do better or had done better. And I think Elphaba embodies both of that. But there's something perhaps even more than that, Frank. I don't know of too many stories in our time that actually take as their moral question, does it matter whether I'm good or not? I mean, the way you were raised, and the way I was raised, all those decades ago, it mattered. We had, we were taught to be good in very specific, perhaps very limited terms.
It's a very Christian idea.
It is a very Christian idea. It's a burden to carry. And I think part of what sings to people in that way is that this really is a human ambition to be good. It's too embarrassing in our postmodern time to say, I hope I'm remembered for having been a good person. But I think it's still a genuine emotion that we all carry. That's my feeling.
Do you still think about, because this is what Wicked is about. What is it to be good? What is it to be a good person?
I think about it every day and every night. It is a challenge. But this is not a confessional, so that's
No, that's true. It's true. But actually, in these times, especially tonight, in another hour, it's a question that I think is important still to be raised.
Yes. Well, Wicked, the play and the book say some very serious things, even if the plot is different. Characterizations are simplified or overly complicated, depending on which way you like the story told. But the truth is, they have some things in common. Wicked says, life is short. Cherish those you have and try to do the right thing.
Mm. Wonderful words to live by. I will. People will kill me if I don't ask. What's the latest on the movie version of the musical Wicked?
It was actually about to be scheduled just before COVID came. I did not hear that they had done any auditions or had settled on any particular stars. I know the original stars are not going to be on it. Kristen Chenoweth once said to me a long time ago, she said, "They better make it soon, or I'll have to play Madame Horrible." So I don't really know where it stands, but I think they have the shooting script after having been very patiently working at it for a decade. I think they have it.
And what's on your laptop these days? What are you working on that you can share with us?
Well,
or are you after this interview going back to a fetal position until the pandemic is over?
I'm going into a fetal position until November 3rd, or as they're saying, maybe December 3rd, January 3rd. Who knows? I think I do have a book coming out, a children's book, about a year from now, called Watercress. It's about a rabbit who, guess what? Her father died. And even rabbits suffer grief and loss. So I'm very happy about that. I wrote it.
It's a rare book for you to deal with animals in a fable-like way, as opposed to most of your other books, even your children's books, with a few exceptions.
You're right. It was a one-off for me, as the British say. And I was thinking that the main thing I wish my children could have picked up from the books that we read aloud to them is that the variety of emotion, elation and depression, grief and restoration, if you will, is normal. The cycle of feelings is normal. And if you feel down in the dumps, you're not going to feel this way forever. It's going to change. We learn this as we get older. If we're lucky, if we're reasonably mentally healthy, we do know there's a rhythm of it. But I think sometimes when kids first experience serious fear or serious depression or grief, they don't yet know that it's going to lift. You know, so I wanted to write a story that said that for this poor rabbit child.
That sounds great. After the musical movie is filmed, it's a big hit. Years after that, you've written these other books about Oz. After Game of Thrones and Lord of the Rings, I wonder if maybe HBO might be knocking at your door saying, can we take all of the quartet of books that are based in Oz and do this huge epic of a mini-series that will never end?
Wouldn't that be nice? And there is actually some talk about that. ABC Hulu has had some interest in doing a non-musicalized version of
and that's what I'm talking about, a non-musical version.
Right. And years ago, when I did agree to give rights to Broadway to make a play into it, I separated the story into two contingents. the musical version and the non-musical theatrical or filmic version. So ABC has had those rights for about 20 years, and I think they are now seeing Game of Thrones having how well that's been done. I think there's some interest in a Wicked miniseries.
Because it has a lot. I mean, even Wicked itself, the musical is only one part of the book. There's a lot of other goodies in the book.
There are, and by the time we get to the end of the fourth book in the series, Out of Oz, the whole epic has taken about 80 years from the life of the parents of Elphaba to the time Elphaba's granddaughter named Rain flies out of Oz. That's what the last book is called, Out of Oz.
Well, I'd love to see that. I think now's a good time to shift over to Jennifer and see if Jennifer has. She's been eyeing the comments. I've been trying to here and there. But Jennifer, can you rejoin us and bring in some of our visitors?
Well, here I am. I think there's a little bit of an echo, but can everybody deal with it?
Your voice seems the least echoey to me.
Okay, very good. First of all, oh my goodness, Gregory, you are my new best friend. This is my tour book. I read it once a year.
Look at that.
That's mine. I have written about it, and I'm going to show you. Well, you can't see the books behind me, but this is my 2 shelves of books about and by J.M. Barrie. I wrote my master's thesis about Peter Pan.
Wow.
You know, Gregory, forget Peter Pan. J.M. Barrie wrote a play called Dear Brutus.
Yes.
Take a look at that, because I think that has an interesting plot that you can play around with.
Wow. Well, Jennifer, I hope you will forgive me. I hope I didn't say anything offensive about J.M. Barrie.
No. We should talk offline, though, because
yes.
we share a lot of... anyway, who knew? Who knew? What a delightful evening for me personally. And this is probably inappropriate of me to share that, but I've just enjoyed this so much.
Thank you.
And then our audience has been really enthusiastic, and I'm going to ask some of their questions, starting with so William, who's been so helpful and lovely this evening, says, is there anything in Oz left unwritten? I always hope for a larger exploration of Glinda.
Interesting.
That is interesting. At one point, William, when I wasn't sure where I was in my creative mind, I actually began to think about doing a book called, well, I don't know what it would be called, but it was sort of like that show where Bugs Bunny was a baby. Remember that? Remember there was a TV show where all the Looney Tunes characters were infants, and they still had their same characters. I don't think it was deeply successful, so that's probably why I didn't do something myself. But I actually thought about doing a story about both Elphaba and Glinda in kind of parallel moments in their childhood and how they were same and how they were different. I never did that. Maybe one day I will.
Prequel.
A prequel. Yes, a prequel of my own sequel. As it were.
Grace wants to know, Gregory, your stories are often twisty, convoluted, perhaps. As a writer, how do you plan out your narratives and keep track of it all?
Oh boy, that's a really good question. And isn't it interesting? Whose question was that? Did you say?
Grace.
Grace, isn't it interesting? I'm actually such a really nice guy, like a schlub, but there is a kind of ominous, somewhat tortured way that I look at things. I have a feeling that my books are kind of therapy for me, and I put the less salubrious parts of what I understand about the world in my books so that I don't have to carry them around in my heart all the time. I'm basically pretty easygoing and pretty calm. But how do I plan out my books? They are tortured. They're torqued, let's say.
Twisty or convoluted,
Yeah.
is what Grace said.
Let me twist myself into my own knots here trying to consider this question. What I do great, or what I have for many years, is I divide a book into 5 sections. And as a certain image or a phrase or a word occurs to me, I write it down on a Post-it note and I put it up under one of the 5 sections. Like one might be a swan flying through a snowstorm. You know, what a beautiful image that is. Okay, I'll put that in 4 or 5. Now, you might ask, Dave, well, why 5? And that's because when I lived in London, my kitchen cabinets had 5 doors up above. So for all the books that I wrote when I was in England, they each had 5 sections because that was the kitchen cabinets taught me how to break up my plot. I don't plot things out seriously. I don't work everything out ahead of time the way J.K. Rowling is said to have done.
Wow.
I try to be more organic. I try to listen to what my heart wants to say and what my reading eyes want to read. I've always been my own first reader, so I keep writing to see what's going to happen next.
Well, that's fascinating. I envisioned, you with 4 whiteboards and sticky notes in a room that goes, wow, I'm surprised and very impressed.
I've learned to trust my storytelling instinct. At the beginning, I tried to plot things out more, but they began to feel too mechanical. I wanted to write something that felt full of life, and life surprises us, including the people who are making the story.
Wow, that's amazing. Thank you for sharing that with us. So our friend Samantha, who's been also very active and helpful this evening, says, since you love the retelling or different perspective of stories, would you ever do another telling or angle of the legend of Sleepy Hollow? And who, perhaps, would you choose as your protagonist? And she says the question is in honor of the spooky season.
Well, that is a really spooky season. I have to say, I've always felt that I had not encountered Washington Irving as deeply as probably I ought. And the reason I say that is that one of the first stories that I remember from grade school that I read in what we used to call a reader, was the story of Rip Van Winkle. And I loved Rip Van Winkle because it took place in the Catskills. The Dutch settled the Hudson River Valley. And Rip Van Winkle he went to sleep when that part of the Catskills was Dutch, and he woke up when it was British. Possibly it wasn't a state yet, but it had been changed. And the Catskills were only 30 miles from where I grew up, so it felt like a private family story. And now I'm getting old enough to be Rip Van Winkle myself. I suppose it's time to begin to think about that kind of thing.
So, is there a Rip Van Winkle story in your future?
Who knows? I keep thinking I'm done writing, and then I wake up and keep writing.
No, we don't want you to be done writing, Gregory.
Well, you might change your mind one day, but thanks.
Many of the questions are about what's next. There are questions about any chance for a follow-up to Egg and Spoon from William.
How about the musical of Egg and Spoon?
Yeah, tell us what you're working on and what's in the plans. And
well, regarding Egg and Spoon, Universal Studios has also optioned that, and they had engaged as a composer for a musical version of Egg and Spoon, a live-action musical film, like The Wizard of Oz, let's say. The composer Jeannie Tesori, who wrote the music for Fun Home, and I think he wrote for Carolina Queen too. Did she? Jeannie Tesori.
two, maybe.
And Trash,
And something off Broadway just this last season.
Yeah.
That was wonderful. She's terrific.
Yeah, she is terrific. And it's still under option from Universal, but Universal has Wicked too. So I think they don't want to bring out two big fantasy musical movies based on my work at the same time. They probably want to bring out Wicked first and see how it does. See if it floats the boat.
Imagine it will.
I hope so.
I'm guessing.
Did you see online there's a Wicked voting little YouTube thing that's about 4 minutes long? Cast and members of the Wicked, probably the current cast that's now on furlough, singing to the tune of Loathing, singing voting. Voting. It's really pretty terrific, and I encourage people to go onto YouTube when this evening is done, after the debate, and check it out. It's a lot of fun, and if you, like me, feel a kind of separation anxiety from Broadway, just to see people singing and dancing and being as beautifully alive as they always are in theater. It's so refreshing. It's like a mint lozenge.
Oh, I will post a link. So one of the great things about Crowdcast is that this chat that we've been enjoying stays live after the event even happens, and this talk has been recorded, so everybody can watch it again over and over again, and you can continue to communicate with one another, and I will post a link to that in the chat so you can watch it tomorrow or whenever. But oh my gosh, what a wonderful evening this has been, and we got off to such a rocky start, and it just has turned out to be so beautiful and so inspiring.
Just let me say, I think Gregory has some of his best writing in the new book. I've underlined so many great phrases and thoughts and images. So it's a lovely book. So it's perfect. You will feel so good with this book.
So I sent you all an email today asking you to send me your shipping address because we want to ship your copies out to you, and I need to get your addresses. So please send them to me. A number of you have already, but don't forget to do that. And Frank, you're already a member of the Mark Twain House family. Gregory, you were and you are again. And you know, when I came to the Mark Twain House and started running the public programs, I said, the Mark Twain House is a writer's home and a home for writers. And Gregory, I want you to think of the Mark Twain House as a writing home for you as well. And
Thank you so much. I'll be there Tuesday morning with a suitcase.
All right, very good. I will change the sheets for you.
Well, thank you on my behalf as well, Gregory. It's been an utter pleasure as always.
Let me say as my final word that what you are doing to preserve the humanity embodied in the words of Mark Twain and the way that he attaches to generation past and to our generation and to generation to come is very significant work. You might think, why am I not in the hospital doing COVID testing? Why am I not in public policy? My dears, you are in public policy. Literacy, literature is public policy. So thank you for your engagement in that way.
Thank you.
And vote.
I can say another word.
Good night, all.
Good night.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. Thank you. Hope you get your power back, Gregory.
Thank you.
Good night, everybody. Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Thank you.